Hey there, back again so soon? It is I, your Irish champion of the deserts, the forest, and everything else in between. Last we spoke, I had become a vassal of the King of France. You could say that we were becoming buddies. Today we're starting out by helping him with a little issue. It would seem some of the citizens of France are being attacked by smugglers near one of our cities. We would utilize the information that he provided to us to track them down near Orleans. After tracking them down, the poor cowards tried to offer me a bribe. I have honor, you fool. You'll be lucky if I don't slaughter you for that. Damn it, I will surely try. If there's one thing in this world I can't stand other than bandits, looters, cowards, liars, it's smugglers. We would track down every single smuggler and fire upon him like the mighty French force that we were. Speaking of which, after defeating them, I decided to put on a fine fur cloak. Every French general has to look his best, eh, Sven? Just a couple of distinguished gentlemen. After turning the smugglers over to justice, I decided to take a trip to Lyon. That way we could participate in a tournament. We're currently at peace with the Spanish, and better yet the British as well, so we really have nothing better to do. Besides, we could win some prizes and even some money. Not only would this be a good opportunity to make some moolah and win some prizes, but we may also get a good bit of renown after they see my amazing pistol work. On guard, ye filthy scallywag! The first round was all pistols, and the second here, as you can see, was me with my rifle as our teammates tried to attack them with swords. The third round was indeed a bit of sword play though, with a handsome Frenchman. Eventually though, he would fall to my might, as you could imagine. For the final round, the imbeciles put a pistol in my hands, which was a big mistake on their part. I hid behind a tree and took a pot shot, knocking the man out cold and winning me the tournament. I was tickled to death, and then I realized I'm getting a bit of a bald spot on the back of my head. Perhaps you think this is a game glitch with the textures or something, but you're wrong. I actually have lice. Most of the French men of my age do. That's why we wear powdered wigs normally. But let us not dwell on my balding head. Let's speak about my achievements, like me winning this tournament and the prize that came along with it, to make a quick and easy 16,000 gold. After the tournament, I decided to go around and begin helping out some of our local townsfolk, like this gentleman here. Apparently a lot of their farm animals had died due to disease and other factors, and they needed a few cows. He was willing to give me 1,900 gold, but keep in mind I will have to use some of the money to purchase a few cows. Now, only 4 of them, because I do currently have 3 along with me. I had only been gone for about less than a day or so, and by the time I returned, he tried to lower the price to 1,300 gold. He claimed he didn't have the rest of it. This bastard was trying to swindle me, so I demanded a fair price, and lo and behold, he did have all the money. Filthy liar. After that starving Spanish peasant tried to trick me, I then returned to France, where I would encounter the beautiful noblewoman known as Francois Charlotte. She, she very well may be the love of my life. She thought we were moving a little too quick, so I decided to maybe kinda play it cool. Kind of. She was quick to tear down my ego though, saying that I would need to rise considerably in the world first. Ouch. She did, however, say that she would be open to meeting with me from time to time to see if we're right for each other. Until then, my fair maiden. I suppose she is right though. We've only recently became a vassal to the king. We need to rise up through the ranks. And one way to go about doing that is through tournaments. So we're going to be entering one in Paris. We need to try and ensure that we're doing our very best to win each and every tournament that we enter. No self-respecting French noblewoman would want to even try to court a lice-infested Irishman like myself unless he's at least famous a little bit. Alas, if only love were this easy, cutting down a man when he was hardly looking. Nevertheless, we'll do what it takes to win the hand of our fair lady, cutting down swaths of men, whether it be in these tournaments, round by round, or in some type of war once more. By the third round of the Paris tournament, we were taking on a French marshal. The man was a damn artist with a sword, and if I could be frank with you, he was really giving me a run for my money. That is. For the final round, they put another pistol in my hand. My God, when will they learn this doesn't make it very fair for everyone else? With one final shot, we had claimed victory in yet another tournament. The fine people of Paris would surely sing my praises now. After winning in Paris, we decided to move a little bit further south. We would continue going tournament to tournament, me and Sven. As our closest ally, it would only make sense that he and I would be on the same team right from the get-go. But once they realized the two of us were essentially an unstoppable killing machine, although we were only knocking people out, they decided that they would need to change things up a little bit. They would take us, the dynamic duo, and pit us against one another. Damn these tournament organizers, making me beat the absolute shit out of my best friend and comrade. Sorry, buddy, had to be done. Our final match was against a Portuguese swordsman whose tactics could not match that of the French. Finally, our third tournament was under my belt. We would have many more after this, but I won't bore you by showing you every single match from them. Just know that these are the tournaments that I won. To begin with, the final matches of many of them were swords, but eventually some of them ended up being pistol competitions, which I was quite sad about because I was becoming quite distinguished with a sword as well. But I suppose nothing quite compares to the old lead ball throwing, black powder burning hand cannon. Yes, indeed, we had won many a tournament, and my name was now being shouted from the rooftops as I left each city. We were quite well known. That being said, we didn't always win each tournament. There were many times that I had completely lost, but I just wanted to tell you about the good ones. All of our victories would accumulate into an immaculate Tier 3 clan, finally. And as you can imagine, we won many a prize, one of which being a well-crafted pistol, and the other being these nice shoulder pauldrons to wear with our armor and uniform. But I'm afraid our little victory tour of the cities would be quickly over, as we were once again at war with the Kingdom of Great Britain. The nation needed us. But first, before we ride, we need to stop in at Paris. In case I were to die in battle, I wish to spend my last few moments with my beautiful love interest. She would agree to something of a date, although we didn't exactly call it that. We spent the evening trying to get to know each other, and I would tell her tales of my homeland, and we would discuss hypothetical situations of if we were to obtain power, and it was nice, truly it was. But, m'lady, I'm afraid I must bid you farewell once more, as I have an army to raise. I went village to village recruiting militiamen to our cause. We would begin heading towards jolly old England once more to bring the fight to them. As the king was laying siege to a local city, I would patrol the area and take on smaller armies. One such army would end up being led by King William himself. Finally, I may take on the devil that's been occupying my homeland for so long. To say that I would enjoy this would be a massive understatement. The king and his army shall fall before me. No mercy. My companions and I would spearhead the attack, attempting to try and funnel the enemy cavalry into our firing line. I would ride into the enemy firing line to try and distract their soldiers. This went well until I was knocked off my mount, but luckily I could depend on my soldiers to finish the fight for me. I would then have the opportunity of a lifetime to kill the king. But I knew, just like a horrific hydra, another would quickly take his place. So he would become my prisoner, although I believe this to be a mistake, as we were quickly encountered by the Lady Catherine thereafter. It would seem, since the king and his men never made it to the front lines, that they've come looking for him. But all they'll find here is me, with a rifle firmly gripped into my hands. The terrain was wet, muddy, and treacherous. The only bright side to the terrain being like this is that if we're having trouble navigating, as are they. After a couple of hours of fighting, it would seem that they began a retreat out of the area, though we wouldn't allow them to leave. We were victorious, though now our numbers were severely depleted. We would end up taking Lady Catherine prisoner, of course, but I'm afraid she and the king wouldn't be imprisoned for very long. We were tracked down by a young noble by the name of Frederick. We were severely outnumbered, and many of my men were still injured from previous battles. To show you my defeat at the hands of this young man, who isn't even old enough to have hair on his face yet, would be completely humiliating. So I'll just tell you about it. After we lost the battle, he would take us to Waterford to be prisoners. To think, after all these years, I've finally been able to return to my homeland, but in shackles. not with the mighty liberating army I had hoped. I would be able to find my way out of the dungeon in Waterford though, and I would go town to town recruiting Irishmen to my cause. Most of them were simple farmers who were willing to take up arms against their occupiers. I knew that my victories in Ireland would be few and far between, and eventually I will definitely be taken prisoner once more. But perhaps I could distract their armies and cause them to divert them towards Ireland and away from King Louis. And maybe, just maybe, begin to sow the seeds of rebellion in these lands once more. Once my Irish brethren hear of my glorious victories or even my rebellious defeats, perhaps they'll be inspired to do the same when I return in a few years with my own army. The British nobleman known as David and his men would fall before me and mine. Naturally, I had a home-field advantage here. I was within my element. We had eventually come upon the lord known as Lewis, though. This was looking to be quite a devastating battle. Even though we almost had 20 more soldiers than he, we were only simple militiamen while he had well-trained soldiers. Nevertheless, bravery runs through our veins, and the only thing that would run from these emerald hills would be blood. I would do my best to try and keep them away from my riflemen, but unfortunately I watched as many of them would begin to fall. I could not bear to see my kinsmen slaughtered like this. I would gallop into and through their firing line, hoping that it would cause their formation to crack, but I was too late, as all of my men had fallen in battle, and I was the last to still be standing against 20 or so redcoats. Thankfully, my horse would easily run circles around them. I would make my last stand here today. It would be damn near impossible for me to take every single one of them out, but I will take as many of them to hell as possible, and they shall tell the tale of Irish's last stand for many ages to come. I was out of musket balls now. It would be time for me to resort to my sword if I had any chance of winning this. I had already dwindled their numbers from 20-something odd redcoats down to about 5, but getting in close like this would be my downfall. I had finally been put down, but luckily I was alive, even with blood trickling into my ear canal and my left arm completely broken. I got off lucky compared to all the militia that we had with us. It was quite clear to me now that we weren't ready to take Ireland just yet, but perhaps soon. Naturally, we were taken prisoner and brought to Dublin to serve out our time until the French would ransom us out after the war, but you know me, I am a bit dubious. And thus I had managed to escape my captors, being chased out of Ireland by a large army. Eventually, I would finally make it back to France, where I would raise an army of my own once more. With a large militia by my side, I would sail back to England. I had hoped to link back up with the king and his army to try and help them take any nearby castles or cities, but I realized at one point that we had already taken Pembrok and the king had given it to us. I'm not exactly sure as to when he had granted this city to us, but I'm more than happy to take it, of course, and we also get the nearby villages and a castle for ourselves. But there was more work to be done as we had a large English party, actually it's just 5 soldiers. Shouldn't be much of an issue. Actually, I can't even find them. Shortly thereafter, there was a complete uprising in Pembroke. These fine Welsh folks weren't all that happy about being governed by a mighty, handsome Irishman for some reason. So I would call upon the king and his army to help me lay siege to the city so that we may take it back under our control. I was feeling a bit trigger happy and decided to lead the very first charge against the city. I will say though, this may not have been the best idea, and I most likely should have waited for the king and his forces, as many of my men were still greenhorn militia. Then again, I thought to myself, many of these rebels are simple peasants and farmers who have taken up arms against me, so we shouldn't have much of an issue. I would rush in blindly on my mount before running up the hill on foot. I would try to beat my men to the walls by taking out the enemy riflemen, thus giving them something of an advantage. We would begin climbing as the enemies fired their muskets down on us. I too would scale these mighty stone walls, and atop them many a men would meet my sword. I was blinded by the chaos of battle and my rage, fighting like an unhinged animal. I had become sloppy and I was defeated in battle. As the enemies began their victory cheers, my men would make a swift retreat, pulling me off the top of the walls. I would once again regroup with the king king and his men to let him know of my failure, and the following day, with more forces at my command, we would begin yet another attack. I refused to fail and be humiliated this time around. Rushing into the way of my men is a fool's mistake. Emotions will not win this city, not during this battle, and not after when we're governing once more. We must take with force now, and later on lead with compassion. But right now, we really just need to focus on the force part, and that's why we're going to use our ram to break down these rebellious doors. Similar to the night before, I would scale the walls with my men, but a few balls of lead would help us change the circumstances. Nothing would save them from the wrath of me, the Irish giant, and my liberating ways. We would continue pushing and pushing, making our way further into the heart of the city, and eventually, it was ours once more. The king was quite impressed with my heroics during battle, so much so that he decided to ignore my previous blunder. Now that the city is back under our control, we would begin hunting down all of their British enablers. This was becoming quite personal for me. As a lord, I have a responsibility to this city and to all of those under its influence. And a fool like Lady Catherine here would not get in my way, especially not with this city so close to my homeland. Thankfully, the king would stay in the area, helping us control the city and the ferry point that is under the influence of the city. Keeping it under our control was often much easier said than done, as we were getting into plenty of shoreline battles with the British. This newly controlled land was a light in a very dark tunnel, and we would defend it with every last drop of blood that we had. We would take a mile but refuse to give even a singular inch. Let them sing of our ferocity on this battlefield here today throughout the ages, as many a man would meet his swift end at the end of our swords and muskets. We had won. Just on the outskirts of the city, at one point I had tracked down a small party led by a gentleman by the name of John. Judging by his head attire, I would hamper a guess that he may be related to the King William himself. That and his smugness, we'll see about that. Aw, why so blue, little friend? We'll send word to the king to come and pick up his dog. By this point, British forces seem to be dwindling quite rapidly. As you can see here, Lord Thomas, who was defeated, only had 7 soldiers under his command. Not that we minded, it simply made it easier to make a fair penny off his ransom and the items that he and his men had. We would eventually come upon a fair-sized party led by the noblewoman known as Lady Anne. Though this was our first encounter with her, perhaps she was a new vassal of the king's, or maybe even a mercenary leading British forces against our own. Unfortunately for them, on this fateful night it will be their end, as they are sorely outmatched. As the moonlight would glisten off my steel pauldrons, my aim was true. And upon this night, not a singular shot was missed. Sure, I shot a few horses, but they were enemy horses, so the smoke would cloud around us and fill our eyes with soot. But even the blind could see that this battle was ours. And whether she be a noble lady, as we had suspected, or a mercenary, Lady Anne was defeated. We would return finally to our city of Pembrok and donate many of our troops to the garrison to ensure the safety of the citizens. It is true, though, that the majority of this donation were some simple British militia forces, but we need our more seasoned soldiers with us at all times. We also decided to have a look around our Lord's Hall. We had been so busy ensuring the safety of the city and all those who inhabit it that we hadn't even had a chance to go look around at it. The halls and shelves were adorned with ancient Welsh arts, and above the feasting hall was our very own throne room, littered with the finest of furs and tapestries. An old Irishman could get used to these luxurious comforts. But alas, I must continue my campaign across the lands with the king and his armies. After joining French forces, we would begin besieging Penrith Castle. Over the next few weeks, as we were building siege castles, the lice of my hair became a bit bothersome, so I decided to shave my head. Probably not the best idea, as it was now very much winter time and extremely cold around my ears and the back of my neck. Regardless of my cold, bald head, though, I would have to lead an attack on this castle. It was very much well defended by British soldiers, but that's never stopped us before, of course. Well, maybe a time or two. We began sloshing through the deep snow, making our way towards our defenses to fire at the enemy riflemen atop the towers, of course. I had hoped that my gunfire would be so fierce that I would take the attention away from the battering ram that was just now arriving at the city gates. After breaking them down, this castle was sure to be ours. Even after entering the courtyard of the castle, we were all shoulder to shoulder. This was the perfect environment for a little bit of hands-on combat with the old sword. I would slice many a man, giving much-needed support to our soldiers, but I was becoming exhausted and overwhelmed. Eventually, I would take an axe to the old helmet, which knocked me unconscious, I'm afraid. Just add it to my list of injuries, I suppose. Even without my guidance, but also with the help of many a reinforcement, we would end up taking this castle. Yet another victory under our belts, even though our companions had to carry me back to camp and get the dent out of my helmet. This will almost definitely not be the last time we have to liberate this castle, as it seems to be a hotly contested area. While we were still here, though, I decided to visit the dungeon, as I heard that there was a high-profile prisoner here. Upon further inspection, it would appear to be the King William himself, wallowing around in the mud like a pig. Ironic that he be subjected to the same treatment that he oppresses others with under his rule. It's such a shame that he's worth more alive than dead, but his day too shall come. The best part about being the Lord of Pembrok was that we could actually control the ferry point into Ireland from the city, meaning of course that we had easy passage into our homeland anytime that we liked. This would also make it quite easy for us to travel to Ireland to try and hunt down any enemy parties that we could come across. Many of their forces seem to have scattered here after we had invaded their homeland, but nowhere would be safe for them as I continued to swell my ranks with Irish militiamen. Many of them wanted these occupiers out of their beautiful snowy hills just as bad as I did. Something, of course, that I and my kinsfolk share in common. Slowly but surely, we shall root them out of every crevice of this land. Seasons come and go, wars begin and end, but my objective will always be the same, and the lengths that I would go to free this land from its occupation know no bounds. For freedom and liberty run steaming hot through my veins, and my steel shall cut through every barrier that awaits. By this point in the war, I was quite well known around these lands. Our enemy, Lady Helen, even spoke of how my name strikes fear in men's hearts, as it damn well should. Let them whisper in the shadows about me while my pony prances around their corpses on the battlefield. But all good things must come to an end, and as did the war with the British and our campaign through their lands, with them not only surrendering to us, but also having to pay us dues after the war ends. Now, with threats to Pembroke no longer an issue, we decided to make the very long journey back into France. We were headed back to Paris to meet our lady love. It's also worth mentioning that during this time, my hair had grown back out by quite a bit, so hopefully this will help me swoon her off her feet. We had finally arrived in Paris, but in the Lord's Hall, we did not find our Lady Francois. We found her father, Lord Henry Francois. I would explain to him that I had began courting his daughter and I was asking for his blessing. He said that they were still looking for a suitable partner for her, but he did require a bit of an offering, as is custom. No price was too high for the love and comfort of a lifelong best friend in the form of a wife, so we would pay close to 50,000 gold. And with that, my friends, we were now going to be a married man. Until next time.